7 of the victims of Thursday's deadly fire in the Johannesburg CBD have been laid to rest. Now, the 6 adults and a child were among the 77 who died when the Usindiso Building in Marshalltown was gutted. Now, family members of these victims have visited the Diepkloof mortuary in Soweto to try and identify the bodies of their loved ones. And now, head of the Biomedical Forensic Science Unit at UCT, Associate Professor Laura Heathfield, joins us live now to talk about the difficulties that would be involved in this particular process around the DNA collection. Prof, thank you so much for your time. Let's start with the challenges that could unfold right now as various authorities try to piece together the DNA evidence.
Evening, Bogiwe. There are numerous challenges in this case. From the DNA perspective, burnt remains are some of the most difficult to get usable DNA from. The heat from the fire can fragment the DNA, and to recover usable DNA that we can analyze and generate a DNA profile can be very time consuming. On this sort of scale, the process is likely to take a few weeks. And it might be that the pathologist needs to go back to the victim to obtain more samples or different samples if the first attempt wasn't successful. Then another big challenge is linking our DNA profiles that we get from the victims to reference samples. So a reference sample is one that is a DNA profile from a known individual, and that reference profile could be on a national DNA forensic database, or it might be provided by a friend or family member who knew the victim, such as in the form of a personal item like a hairbrush or toothbrush. Unfortunately, many of the personal items might have also been burnt in the fire, but other blood relatives could come forward and provide a reference sample. And with DNA, because we share DNA with our relatives, we can also identify the victims through their family members.
And I'm going to come to that in just a moment, Prof, because there have been calls for the families to come forward to provide some of the sampling. But I want to go back to your earlier point. Does it mean then that the quality of the samples in it itself in some of these instances might have been compromised?
Absolutely. The temperature of the fire as well as the duration of the heat can significantly fragment the DNA, and it makes the DNA very degraded and difficult to analyze. So it would compromise the sample, yes.
So what does it mean then in an instance if the sample is compromised and then a family member comes forward and says, I do have someone in there? So how does it then work to try and make sure that they then maybe are able to locate their relative or not?
So there are new technologies such as something called massively parallel sequencing, which is designed to recover the most amount of information from degraded samples. So if conventional methods are unsuccessful, then we could turn to using new technology. And even though it's a compromised sample, we can still gain some information that is useful for identification.
So I suppose then, you look at the fact that around 7 have been laid to rest so far, and some of the family members were raising concerns about, wanting to bury their loved ones within a stipulated time, particularly those who adhere to Muslim burial rites. I suppose then, given this length of a process that is likely to unfold, it might just be a long wait for them then.
Unfortunately, it might be a long wait, and it's unfortunate that the religious beliefs can't be respected, but we need to undertake all of our processes to ensure that we can identify these individuals reliably.
And Prof, there's something else that officials said in one of the press briefings, and they were talking about, of course, there are human remains in a form of full bodies that they'll then be able to try and link up to some of the persons or the family members. But let's talk about the body parts that, in some instances they said they did find at the scene. Does the same kind of process unfold there when you are trying to link that up or identify that particular person?
Yes, so our DNA is the same in all of our cells. So the DNA profile that we get from one part of the body is the same as the DNA profile that we'll get from a different part of the body. So if different body parts have been found and we're trying to link them to the same individual, or we're trying to assess whether different human remains belong even to the same family, we can use the same DNA profiling technique to establish this.